The deadliest gangs in prison history, inside the most violent groups. If you think
The
you know what
situation is
evil looks
escalating.
like,
We need to deploy
think
resources
again,
to these
because
highlighted
what I'm
areas
about to show you will
immediately.
make you realize that some of the world's most dangerous criminals aren't just locked up. They're organized, they're connected, and they're more powerful behind bars than most people are on the outside. Smash that subscribe button, hit like, and drop a comment telling me which prison gang terrifies you the most, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why even correctional officers fear what happens when the cell doors close. Let's get into it. The call came into San Quentin State Prison at 4:32 a.m. on a cold November morning. Officer Michael Santos had been working the graveyard shift in California's most notorious maximum security facility for 12 years, and he'd seen violence that would make most people lose sleep for months. But when he reached cell block D, when he saw what was waiting for him behind that reinforced steel door, even his hardened nerves gave way to pure, cold dread. 3 bodies lay on the concrete floor, arranged in a perfect triangle. The victims were members of a rival gang, men who made the fatal mistake of disrespecting the wrong organization in the wrong prison. But it wasn't just the brutality of the murders that made Michael's hand shake as he reached for his radio. It was a symbol carved into each victim's chest. 3 intertwined snakes forming a crown, the signature mark of La Im, the Mexican Mafia, one of the most powerful and ruthless prison gangs in American history. Code Black, Cell Block D. Michael's voice cracked over the radio. Multiple homicides. Send everyone. Within minutes, the block was swarmed with correctional officers, investigators, and emergency medical personnel who could do nothing but confirm what everyone already knew. These men had been dead for hours, killed with precision and purpose, while hundreds of inmates and dozens of guards were supposedly watching. The impossible had happened again. La Im had struck inside one of the most secure facilities in the country, and nobody had seen a thing, heard a thing, or would ever say a thing. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived from the California Department of Corrections Special Investigations Unit as the sun was rising over San Francisco Bay. She'd spent 8 years tracking prison gang activity, building cases against shot callers who ran criminal empires from 6-by-8-foot cells. She knew the codes, the hierarchies, the blood rituals that bound these organizations together. But even she was shocked by what she found in Cell Block D. They were tortured first, the medical examiner said quietly, pointing to marks on the bodies. For hours, probably. Someone wanted information, wanted them to suffer, wanted to send a message so clear that everyone in this prison would understand it. Sarah studied the crime scene, her trained eyes catching details others missed. The cell door had been locked from the outside. The security cameras in the corridor had mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 4 hours, the precise window when the murders occurred. And most telling of all, the cell that should have held 2 inmates actually held 6. 4 men had somehow been moved from other parts of the prison into this cell without triggering a single security protocol or alert. "We have an inside job," Sarah said flatly. "Someone on staff facilitated this. Someone with access to the security systems, the cell assignments, the camera controls. This wasn't just gang violence. This was an execution carried out with institutional help." Officer Santos stepped forward, his face pale. "Detective, there's something else you need to see." He led her to the cell's small metal desk, pulled open a drawer that should have been empty per prison regulations. Inside was a cell phone, sophisticated and clearly contraband. Sarah picked it up carefully, noting it was still powered on, still receiving messages. The screen showed dozens of encrypted communications, orders flowing in and out of the prison, connecting this cell to the outside world. "They're running operations from in here," Sarah muttered, scrolling through the messages. "Drug trafficking, extortion, murder contracts. This isn't just a prison gang. This is organized crime headquarters that happens to be located inside a maximum security facility." As she continued examining the phone, one message made her blood run cold. It was sent just 2 hours ago, after the murders, to an outside number. The text was brief but chilling. Phase 1 complete. Internal resistance eliminated. Ready for Phase 2. The transfer list is confirmed. 40 soldiers moved to target facilities next week. Nobody suspects. Sarah looked up at Santos. "What transfer list? What's happening next week?" Santos pulled up the prison's administrative database on a nearby computer. We got a massive interstate transfer scheduled. 40 inmates being moved to facilities across California, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. It's part of an overcrowding reduction program. I processed the paperwork myself last month. Who approved the specific inmates on that list? Santos scrolled through the records, and his face went even paler. It was approved by Associate Warden Thomas Brennan. He personally selected which inmates would be transferred and to which facilities. Sarah grabbed her phone, already dialing her supervisor. I need complete background checks on Associate Warden Thomas Brennan, and I need them 5 minutes ago. I also need that transfer halted immediately. We're not moving anyone until I understand what's happening. But as she waited for the call to connect, Santos was staring at his computer screen with an expression of horror. Detective Brennan didn't come to work today. He called in sick, first time in 15 years. Sarah's call went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. She tried the department's emergency line. No answer. Something was very wrong. She turned to Santos. Give me Brennan's home address. Now. 20 minutes later, Sarah and a team of corrections investigators were standing outside Thomas Brennan's suburban home in Oakland. The house was dark, the morning newspaper still on the driveway, Brennan's car parked in the garage. Everything looked normal, but Sarah's instincts were screaming. They knocked. No answer. They called out. Silence. Finally, with probable cause established, they forced entry to the front door. The house was immaculate, furnished tastefully, everything in its place. Family photos lined the hallway, showing Brennan with his wife and 2 teenage daughters, smiling at barbecues and graduations and holidays. But something felt staged, artificial, like a movie set designed to look lived in but missing the authentic chaos of real life. Sarah moved through the house methodically, checking rooms, looking for anything out of place. She found it in Brennan's home office. Unlike the rest of the house, this room was locked, reinforced, clearly meant to keep people out. It took a battering ram to get through. The FBI's Los Angeles field office became ground zero for what agents were now calling Operation Serpent Crown. Sarah Reeves stood in front of a wall-sized screen, displaying a map of the western United States, red dots marking every prison facility where they'd identified suspicious activity. There were 47 dots spread across California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Oregon, and Washington. Each dot represented a facility where at least one corrupted official was believed to be operating. Special Agent Marcus Chun led the briefing, his face grave. In the past 6 hours, we confirmed that 16 of the names on that list found in the victim's mouth are still actively working in their respective facilities. We place them all under surveillance, but we can't arrest them yet without tipping off the entire network. We need to understand what they're planning before we can stop it. Sarah stepped forward, pointing to the countdown timer they recovered from Brennan's computer, now projected on the screen, showing 68 hours and 43 minutes remaining. Whatever happens when this hits zero, it's going to be coordinated. Brennan's documents mentioned synchronization. I think they're planning simultaneous actions across all 47 facilities. Actions like what? Asked Deputy Director Williams, who'd flown in from Washington specifically for this crisis. Prison riots? Mass escapes? What could they possibly coordinate on that scale? Sarah pulled up the organizational charts from Brennan's office. These gangs have been enemies for decades. The Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, Nuestra Familia, they've killed each other for years, fought over territory, drugs, control. But look at these documents. Brennan wasn't just helping one gang. He was facilitating communication between all of them. He was helping them negotiate, divide territory, coordinate operations. What if this isn't about one gang taking power? What if it's about all of them working together? The room went silent as the implications sank in. Agent Chin pulled up surveillance footage from multiple prisons, recorded over the past 2 weeks. We've been seeing unusual patterns. Gang leaders who should be enemies having conversations in prison yards. Transfers of inmates that seem random but when mapped together show clear patterns of strategic positioning. And most disturbing, a significant increase in contraband flowing into these facilities. Not just drugs and phones, but something else. He clicked to a new slide showing confiscated items from a recent shakedown at Pelican Bay State Prison. Among the usual contraband were detailed architectural blueprints of the facility, guard rotation schedules, and most alarming, components that could be assembled into explosive devices. They're preparing for something violent, Chin continued. Something that requires inside knowledge of facility layouts, security protocols, and staff movements. And they're doing it in 47 locations simultaneously. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. What if it's not an escape? What if it's a takeover? What if they're planning to seize control of the facilities themselves? Deputy Director Williams shook his head. That's impossible. Even with corrupt staff, even with weapons and planning, inmates can't hold a facility for more than a few hours before tactical teams storm in. It would be suicide. Unless holding the facility isn't the goal, Sarah said slowly, a terrible realization forming. What if the goal is hostages? What if they're planning to take thousands of people captive simultaneously across multiple states and use that leverage to demand something? Agent Chin pulled up another document. We found this in Brennan's encrypted files. It's a manifesto of sorts outlining demands. They want complete amnesty for all gang leadership. They want control over prison industries and labor programs. They want official recognition as legitimate organizations. And they want their leaders released and given immunity. That's insane, Williams said. No government would ever negotiate those terms. They would if the alternative was watching thousands of correctional officers, civilian staff, and visitors die on live television, Sarah countered. Look at the timing of that transfer list. It happens in 60 hours, right before whatever this countdown is for. They're positioning their people, then they're going to make their move. And I guarantee they plan to broadcast it, to make it public, to create enough pressure that someone in power will have to consider their demands. Williams grabbed his phone, already calling Washington. We need to cancel those transfers immediately. We need to lock down every facility on this list. And we need to arrest every person connected to this conspiracy right now. But Sarah grabbed his arm. If we do that, we lose our chance to understand the full scope of this. We tip them off, and whatever they're planning goes underground. Or worse, they accelerate their timeline, and we have no warning at all. So what do you suggest? We let a potential hostage crisis unfold. I suggest we use the time we have left. We find Thomas Brennan. He's the architect of this. He knows every detail. If we can get to him before that timer runs out, we might be able to stop this without bloodshed. Chin brought up Brennan's financial records. We've been tracking his movements. 3 days ago, he withdrew $200,000 in cash from various accounts. His passport hasn't been flagged at any borders, so he's still in the country. Credit cards haven't been used, so he's operating on cash. But we did find something interesting. He displayed a series of cell phone tower pings. Brennan's personal phone was turned off. We found a burner phone number in his office records that matches a pattern of calls to known gang associates. That phone pinged towers yesterday in rural Nevada, near the town of Beatty, about 2 hours outside Las Vegas. What's in Beatty? Sarah asked. Not much. Population under 2,000. Desert, mountains, abandoned mines. But it's also 30 miles from Nevada State Prison, one of the 47 facilities on our list. Sarah studied the map. He's not running. He's positioning. He's going to be close enough to watch whatever happens, to coordinate if needed. That's where we find him. For hours later, Sarah was in a helicopter flying over the Mojave Desert, part of a tactical team heading toward Beatty. They'd identified a property on the outskirts of town, an abandoned mining camp that showed recent signs of activity. Thermal imaging from drones showed at least 3 heat signatures inside the main building. Chapter 3. The next 48 hours became a blur of coordinated chaos as federal agents, state police, and the few trustworthy corrections officials worked frantically to protect the 40 witness transfers. Sarah hadn't slept since finding Brennan's video, surviving on coffee and adrenaline as she coordinated from a secure FBI command center in downtown Los Angeles. The walls were covered with maps, timelines, and photos of everyone involved in what was now officially designated as the largest corruption investigation in Department of Justice history. Agent Chin burst into the room. His phone pressed his ear, his expression grim. "We've got a problem." 3 of the transfers were just canceled by state corrections departments. Officials citing security concerns and administrative delays. But when we checked, the orders came from people on Brennan's list. They're trying to keep the witnesses in facilities where they can be eliminated. Sarah was already moving, pulling up the relevant files. Which 3? Nevada State Prison, Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence, and Calipatria State Prison in California. 18 witnesses total, all scheduled to move in 9 hours. Override the cancellations. Federal authority. Those transfers happen as planned, and we put armed federal marshals on every bus. But even as she gave the orders, Sarah knew they were spread impossibly thin. The corrupted officials had resources she couldn't match, connections throughout the system, and the home field advantage of knowing every protocol, every weakness, every opportunity for sabotage. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "Check your email." Sarah opened her secure email account and found a message with no subject line, sent from an encrypted server. Inside was a video file. She clicked play, and Thomas Brennan's face appeared again, but this time he looked haggard, filmed in what appeared to be a different location, possibly recorded just hours ago. "Detective Reeves, if you're receiving this, it means my automated system detected unusual activity around the transfer schedules. They're not going to let this happen peacefully. I need you to understand something crucial. The 40 witnesses aren't just inmates with information. They're former gang leaders who made a choice. They could have stayed loyal to their organizations, maintained their power, lived out their sentences with respect and protection. Instead, they chose to cooperate because even they were disgusted by how corrupt officials were using gang violence for profit, how the system was designed to keep them criminal instead of rehabilitated." Brennan's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But there's something I didn't include in the main files, something I've kept hidden, because the moment it comes out, I'm a dead man. The corruption doesn't stop at wardens and administrators. It goes to the very top. I have evidence linking the Attorney General of California, 2 federal judges, and a sitting U.S. Senator to this conspiracy. They've been receiving payments, facilitating contracts, protecting the corrupt system in exchange for millions in campaign donations and personal kickbacks. These aren't just bureaucrats covering their mistakes. These are the people who wrote the policies that created this monster." Sarah felt her blood run cold. If Brennan was right, they weren't just fighting corrupt prison officials. They were fighting people with the power to shut down investigations, bury evidence, and destroy careers with a single phone call. "The evidence is in a safety deposit box in Reno," Brennan continued. "Box 347 at First National Bank, under the name David Morrison. The key is hidden in plain sight. Check the photo I left on the laptop, the one from the corrections conference. Look at my badge number. That's the access code for the box. Get that evidence, detective. It's the only thing that can protect you and those witnesses when the people at the top realize you know their names." The video ended. Sarah immediately pulled up the photo Brennan had mentioned. His badge number read 347-7623. She committed it to memory, then looked at Chun. "I need to get to Reno. Now! We can't spare you. The transfers start in 8 hours, and we need you coordinating. This evidence is bigger than the transfers. If Brennan's right, if this goes all the way to the Attorney General, then we're not just fighting prison corruption. We're fighting people who can shut down this entire investigation with a single order. We need that evidence as insurance, as leverage to keep ourselves alive." Chin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Take a team. Get in, get the evidence, get back. You got 6 hours." Sarah grabbed 2 trusted agents and headed for the helicopter pad. The flight to Reno took 90 minutes, the city lights below looking deceptively peaceful. She kept thinking about Brennan's words. Even the gang leaders were disgusted. What did it say about a system when career criminals had more ethics than the people running it? They landed at Reno Tahoe International just before midnight. The bank wouldn't open until 9 a.m., which gave him 8 hours to wait. But Sarah couldn't risk being exposed in a public place. Instead, they secured a safe house and prepared for what would come next. At 8:45 a.m., they approached the bank dressed as business professionals. Sarah presented the paperwork she'd forged, claiming to be David Morrison's attorney with power of access. The bank manager, a nervous man in his 50s, verified the code and led them to the vault. Box 347 was larger than Sarah expected, requiring 2 keys to open. Inside were 3 USB drives, a thick folder of documents, and a handwritten letter addressed to whoever comes for the truth. Sarah pocketed the drives and opened the letter. Brennan's handwriting was shaky, written recently based on the date at the top. If you're reading this, then you made it further than I thought possible. The evidence in this box will destroy careers and political ambitions, and possibly bring down an entire administration. The Attorney General knew about the corruption for 4 years and did nothing because the private prison lobby contributed $8 million to her campaigns. The senator pushed legislation that increased mandatory minimum sentences, while his wife sat on the board of 3 private prison corporations. The judges I've documented took bribes to ensure certain defendants received maximum sentences in facilities that profited from high populations. This isn't just crime. This is a systemic betrayal of everything the justice system is supposed to represent.